As we all know, we have all loved and cherished Bionicle over the years. But in this documentary, we are going to be digging much deeper than what we already know. We are going to be going over storyline, sponsors, how LEGO came to be with Bionicle, and even an exclusive interview from the writer of Bionicle, the one and only Greg Farshtein. Bionicle's first sets were released in 2001. However, in 2000, people started testing children with Bionicle toys, seeing if they would like the theme. And in fact, they did. Henceforth, in 2001, the first sets were released. The Toamata, the Rahi, and many other sets were put on the shelves. McDonald's even had a promotion, having kids' meal toys be mini Bionicles that you can actually put together with pieces that were actually, in fact, manufactured by the LEGO company. Just like I said, McDonald's got a sponsorship with Bionicle, but many other sponsorships soon joined. There were Bionicle video games, Bionicle backpacks, Bionicle shirts. There were even Bionicle toothbrushes, which I once had. Yes, I once even had a Bionicle toothbrush myself. To dig a bit more deeper in the creation of Bionicle, you see, in the late 1990s, LEGO went through a Great Depression. They have lost a lot of money and laid off many workers for not needing as many. Then henceforth they created not Bionicle, but LEGO Star Wars, which has become a huge hit over these years, and has lasted more than 10 years, and is still in functioning status today. However, LEGO still had to work quite hard to keep the licenseship writings from George Lucas, the creator and owner of Star Wars. The precedent of Bionicle was something what we would call Throwbots and Sliders, which was the actual name of it. Sliders and Throwbots used pretty much the same technic pieces that the first Bionicle sets did, including the same Kanoka discs that were used all the way to 2004 of Bionicle, the Metro New years, and even the Toamata torsos and limbs and whatnot. However, this theme did not last long. It only lasted a few years before being discontinued and being the precedent of Bionicle. It was successed by Bionicle. Bionicle was much more popular than Sliders and Throwbots ever. For Bionicle lasted 9 to 10 years, from summer 2001 all the way to winter 2010, which is a total of 9 years, while Sliders and Throwbots only lasted a little while, which this proves that many people like Bionicle much more than they like Sliders and Throwbots, and LEGO has made the right decision by choosing to discontinue Sliders and Throwbots and create Bionicle. However, that's enough talking about how Bionicle came to be in the creation of LEGO. Let's actually talk about the Bionicle storyline itself. Yes, Bionicle did have a storyline, something that many LEGO themes didn't really have. In 2001, the first year for Bionicle, the storyline was what we call Quest for the Masks. The storyline begins with the 6 Toamata, Tahu, Liwa, Gali, Kopaka, Pohatu, and Anua, arriving on an island known as the Island of Motunui, remembering nothing beyond their names and scraps of disturbing dreams. They discovered the inhabitants, the Matoran villagers, faced constant attacks from infected Rahi, savage beasts controlled by powerful influence of Makuta pterodax through use of infected Kanoki masks, causing war which lasted 1,000 years, and the Toamata fighting for a month to protect the Matoran. After searching for and finding numerous Kanoki masks, the Toa each received a golden Kanoki mask with tremendous power and sought over Makuta himself. After challenging the ferocious Mana's crabs and the Shadow Toa, evil doppelganger like illustrated replicas of the Toa, The Toa confront Makuta and defeat him by uniting their elemental powers. The 2002 storyline was called Borak. Upon his defeat, Makuta released the ancient Borak. The Borak are robotic drones that were designed to cleanse the island of Motunui to its state in the before time. The Borak began to tear through the villages of the island, forcing Matoran to flee. One intervened Matoran of Earth, New Peru, built a powerful vehicle called the Boxer, made from parts of damaged Borak in order to fight the swarms. Toa, unaware of the Borak's purpose, collect the Borak's crime, mask-like creatures that function their brains, to confront the Borak Queen, the Barag, Kadok, and Gadok. The defeated Kadok and Gadok were sealed in a prison created by the Toa's elemental powers. The Toa motto were then exposed to a substance called energized protogerms, which transformed them, granting them new armor and weapons. They renamed themselves the Toa Nuva. The 2003 storyline was actually two storylines in 1 year, the Borak Cow Strike as well as the Mask of Light. After the defeat of the Borak Queens, the Toa and Matoran begin to use the Borak to rebuild their destroyed island, Motunui. However, the 6 new elite Borak, called Borak Cow, appeared in the purpose of releasing the Barag. Their presence was first noticed when the Borak swarms oddly returned to sleep in their hives, and the Toa were no longer able to control the elements. The Borak Cow have stolen the 6 stones that granted the Toa Nuva the ability to control the 6 elements. The Cow used these stones to unlock the Barag from their cubicle prison, but as soon as they begin to place these keys, the Toa Nuva of Fire, Tahu, uses the Mask of Time, a powerful hidden mask that slows down time long enough for the Toa to come up with their plan of pooling all of the energy into the stone tablets. The stone tablets then began to give off power to the Borak Cow, making them unimaginably strong and arrogant with dreams of leading the Borak swarms themselves rather than freeing the Borak Queens. However, their newfound power exceeded their control as the Toa Nuva continued to feed them through the tablets. Eventually, the 6 Borak Cow fell victim to the horrible demise created by their own out-of-control powers, allowing the Toa Nuva to regain their abilities of elemental control and bringing peace to the last of the island of Motunui. However, peace would not last. Shortly afterwards, 2 Matoran, Takua and Jacko, discovered the Kanohi Mask of Light. They were tasked with traveling across the island of Motunui to find the Toa of Light. Meanwhile, Makuta created and sent out 6 creatures called Roxy to find the mask and stop the coming of the Toa of Light. The Roxy tore across Motunui, destroying the villages of Takoro and Onukoro. The Roxy were stopped by the Toa, but not before killing Jowler. Jowler's death caused Takua to realize that he was the Toa of Light, and then he donned the mask and became Toa Takanuva. Takanuva went to confront Makuta, and during the battle they both fell into a pool of energized protogerms, a silvery substance with the power to change or destroy a being, and when became fused together into the being called Takuta Nuva. Takuta Nuva then proceeded to open the door to the city of Metru Nui, allowing the Matoran and Toa through. Using some of his life energy, he revived Jowler while still holding the door open. However, the use of energy was too great for Takuta Nuva, and he was crushed by the door, seeming to kill both Takanuva and Pterrodax, leaving Takanuva's Mask of Light. Takanuva was promptly revived when the mask was used to activate the beacon to Metru Nui. Afterwards, the Matoran prepared to return to the island city of Metru Nui. The 2004 and also the 2005 storylines were actually both prequels to the 2001 storyline, meaning that they happened before the 2001 storyline. The 2004 storyline, or Legends of Metru Nui, goes like this. As the Matoran prepared to journey back to Metru Nui, the Turaga, or village elders, revealed that they had once been Toa. fighting in Metro Nui against threats to the more Buzak line, and the Turaga Doom controlled Rocky, Force Squad. They, as Matoran, were transformed into Toa by Toa stones containing the power of the sacrifice by Toa Likan. Their mission was to find the 6 great discs and defeat the more Buzak, a plant menace that threatened to destroy the city. When it did, however, they were betrayed by Duma, the Turaga of the city. Later, they discovered that Makuta Pterodax had taken the disguise of Duma and taken control of the Vaki, the law enforcement robot. His plan was to put the Matoran to sleep, wipe out their memories, and reawaken them as their so-called conquerors. The Toa fled, but they were attacked by Pterodax. Combining their elemental powers, however, they were able to seal Pterodax in a prison of crystallized Kotagur. The Toa traveled to a new island, which they would be known as Mata Nui, vowing to return someday to save the Matoran. On their journey, they found many dangers, such as the long-lost Matoran Marva, prehistoric Rocky, and the early prototypes of the Vaki, the crowd. When they got to Mata Nui, the Toa Metru hid the great mask of power on the Toa Mata, and Toa Nui were found in the Bionicle Chronicles series, and hid the 6 Toa stones that would later summon Toa Mata to their slumber. The 2005 storyline, known as Web of Shadows, like I said, takes place before the 2001 storyline, but after the 2004 storyline. It goes like this. The Toa return to the city, however the evil King Sidorak and his viceroy Rudaka, agents of the Makuta, have been raining terror on the island, with a vicious spider-like creature called the Bisorak, overrunning the city and mutating everything that lives. The Toa were soon captured and mutated into beastly, half-Toa, half-Rocky Toa Hordika. To revert back to normal, the Toa sought out the legendary Rocky Kitangu, rumored to be known legible in venoms and counter-agents. Toa Vakama, however, succumbed to his Rocky impulses and betrayed the other Toa to join Sidorak, who made him the leader of the Bisorak. The other Toa confronted the Bisorak for the great battle, convinced Vakama to rejoin them. Vakama was ordered the Bisorak to be freed. Kitangu was then killed by Sidorak, whom Rudaka and Vakama betrayed. The six Toa then defeated Rudaka with all 6 of their elemental powers. However, unknown to the Toa, Rudaka carried a shard of the Makuta's prison within her armor. When that shard was destroyed with the Toa's elemental assault, Makuta's prison was destroyed as well, freeing the Master of Shadows. Having been restored by Kitangu, the Toa Metru brought the Matoran to a new eye. On their way to Mata Nui, Toa Vakama jumps out of the airship to retrieve the Mask of Time. However, locating and repairing the minor damage to the mask, Vakama is attacked by Voparak, a temporal-sensitive employee by the Dark Hunter organization. Vakama is knocked unconscious and falls into the sea. Makuta finds him and rescues him, believing Vakama has hidden the mask. To discover its location, Makuta casts Vakama into an illusion. After waking up, he eventually realizes flaws within the illusion and manages to free himself. He and Makuta, condemning to a small troop of Rakshi, form a truce to retake the Mask of Time from the Shadow One, whom Voparak serves as his bodyguard. Sentrak, during the assaulting conflict, which Kitangu joins in and attempts to kill Makuta. Voparak and Sentrak are anticipated, and the Shadow One crippled. Vakama steals the mask and attempts to flee, but the Shadowed One damages Vakama's jetpack and eye beams. Makuta pursues Vakama in the great furnace of the city's fire district. In lieu of Vakama's threat to destroying the mask, Makuta agrees to Vakama's terms of a year of peace with the Matoran and teleports Vakama to the island of Mata Nui, content to show the new location of the mask. The Toa then proceeds to awaken the Matoran by sacrificing their Toa and elemental power. Then, as Turaga, they christen the island and direct the Matoran to build the villages. The 2006 storyline, or Island of Doom as they call it, goes like this. The Toa Nuva learned that Mata Nui, or the Great Spirit that in which the island of Mata Nui was named after, Mata Nui is pretty much the god of the Bionicle universe. But anyway, he was not only sleeping from Makuda's spell cast in the 2004 storyline, but he was also dying. To save him, they must travel to the island of Boya Nui to seek a mysterious Kanoki Ignika, or, in our language, Mask of Life. The Toa Nuva set out on an adventure, but quickly are taken prisoner by 6 new powerful enemies: the Paraka, Zakten, Hanken, Bizok, Thok, Redak, and Avik. They sought for the new mask to control their own dark purposes. When the Toa failed to return, a group of 6 Matoran followed them. Jawa, Hali, Huki, Nupuru, Kongu, and Matoro escaped the island in Toa canisters. But as they traveled, bolts of lightning from the Red Star transformed them into Toa Inika. Along their arrival, they learned of the Paraka and how they enslaved the local Matoran, posing as false Toa. In order to make the Matoran build them a fortress, with the help of small Matoran resistance and the ancient guardian Axon, the Toa Inika were able to free the Toa Nuva, find the Temple of the Mask, and battle the Paraka as well as the other creatures guarding it, including Bizon, on which the Inika was fused to. They eventually emerged with vicious the Kanoki, but the Mask of Life is possessed a will of its own. The last moment eludes them all, rushing into the depths of the sea. The 2007 storyline, or Sea of Darkness, is the follow-up to the 2006 storyline. Following the chase of the Mask of Life, the Toa Inika descends into the waters after receiving the mysterious clue to save the sunken city from an unknown Matoran who had saved Holly from drowning in the coast of him dying from depression sickness. Burst of energy comes from the Mask of Life, transforming the Toa Inika into a water-breathing form. They discovered an inhabited village of Mahari Nui that had broken from Boya Nui and sunk 1,000 years ago. The village was threatened by ancient borders known as the Baraki that had been mutated by nearby mutagenic waters called the Pit. The Toa, now known as the Toa Mahari, face off against the Baraki to survive. However, by the time the Toa retrieved the mask, the Great Spirit dies. Realizing there is still hope, Toa Matoro rushed to the core of the universe, sacrificed his life to revive Mata Nui. In the last moment of his life, Toa Matoro used the mask to teleport Toa Mahari back to Metro Nui and allowed them to breathe air again. The Great Spirit's life was saved, but he still had to be awakened. The 2008 storyline, known as the Final Battle, follows the events of the 2007 storyline, in which the Toa Nuva traveled to the core of the Matoran universe, which is also, in fact, the Mata Nui robot himself. They need to do this to awake Mata Nui, to restore the universe, and save everyone. After being equipped with new armor and weapons by Artaka, the Toa Nuva arrived in Karda Nui, the core of the universe. There, they came to face the Makuda, who were trying to turn the population of Matoran of Night, into Shadow Matoran. The Toa Nuva were helped by the arrival of Takanuva, who now is able to control light and shadow because of a shadow being cast. And Toa Inika, who is the Mask of Life itself. The Kanohi Ignika has made body for itself because it wished to see what it was like to being a living being, because it was imprisoned by Matoro to become a hero. With their combined forces, they reached the structure in the center of Karda Nui called the Codex, where the Toa Inika had to sacrifice his new body to awaken Mata Nui. Takanuva, with the help of the remaining uncorrupt Matoran, returned to the Shadow Matoran to their previous state. Shortly afterwards, the Toa escaped the core before the energy storm caused by Mata Nui's awakening could destroy them. The Makuda, however, failed to escape and were killed. Back in Metru Nui, Mata Nui's awakening was celebrated, But the celebration was cut short when it was revealed that Pterodax had taken over the body of Madanu, revealed to be the universe of the Matoran. Trapped in the spirit of Madanui, or in the Mask of Life, he was sent flying into space, so the former Great Spirit cannot interfere with his control of the universe. That may not seem like a happy ending to the Matoran, being ruled by the Makuta, which they worked so hard to get rid of. But the 2009 storyline, known as The Legend Reborn, and that follows the story of Madanui landing on a mysterious desert planet called Barra Magna. The Bionicle story continues after Madanui was banished from his body by Makuta Pterodax onto a planet called Barra Magna. With the exception of a few wildlife species, Barra Magna was a barren desert planet with only supports for a few resources. So each tribe on the planet had a few warriors called Glatori to battle for them. These resources, such as food, water, are distributed accordingly. The villagers of the world known as the Agori. The Agori together make up 6 different tribes, each afflicted with a region. After the Mask of Life lands on Barra Magna, it creates a body for Madanui to use. Madanui then teams up with a few Glatorians to defeat the combined forces of the Skrull and Bone Hunter, 2 major threats to the villages, and look away for the return of his body. With the help of his new Glatorian and Agori friends, he exposes a traitor known as Metis and defeats the Skrull and Bone Hunters. He helps the villagers of the world unite, taking all the giant pieces of the robot which they use to make their villages, and linking them together into a large prototype robotic body, like the one the Matoran universe resides in. The 2010 storyline, known as Journey's End, is the last storyline year of BioNicle, and the last year to release sets. After defeating the Skrull and seeing that the rest of the villages unite, Madanui stands against the challenge of taking back his old body from Pterodax. He learns that he was created from the great beings on the planet of Spirits Magna, now divided into the jungle moon of Bota Magna and an ocean moon of Aqua Magna, where Makuta Pterodax resides now, as well as the remaining desert Barra Magna where he is now, as a result of the Cold War. Madanui also learns that before he was built, there was a previous robot which the Agori now use as their home. An Agori of Tersara named Tarduk helps Madanui by showing him an ancient power source that could power up the old robot. In his final journey, the 2 heroes return to finish the fight. Tahu returned to his original form to wear the powerful golden armor, all courtesy of the Mask of Life, as well as Takanuva, Toa of Light. They are aided by Gresh, a Glatorian friend of Madanui. They all fight off the Skakti warlord Nekton, who is a Braka, and defeat Makuta and his army, hordes of Rakshi armed with heat vision, as well as Skrull, who are seeking revenge. The story continues as all the forces of both the Matoran universe and Glatorian face the oncoming onslaught of Skakti, Rakshi, and Skrull. The golden armor scattered by Makuta's blast is then collected by Tahu, Gresh, and Takanuva from their many enemies. Tahu defeats the Skakti warlord Nekton and then dons the armor, which then he incinerates every Rakshi Krata on Barra Magna. Pterodax claims that he will destroy Barra Magna with a gravitic energy blast until Madanui forces his arm upwards, causing Pterodax to send the energy wave to the boons above. When Pterodax wants to continue the fight, he is mortally weakened by the destruction of his Rakshi legions. Madanui took advantage of this destruction, pushes Pterodax up into one of the onrushing fragments of the moon of Aqua Magna, whose impacts destroy his core processor, which kills Pterodax in the process. Madanui then mourns the brother that he could have had in his mind. The finale includes when Madanui uses his strength and power of the Mask of Life to bring Spirits Magna back together once more, and to heal those who were mutated by the pit mutaging, bringing life back to the planet and reconstruct the destroyed geographical features. The strain causes his power cult to dissipate, destroying the prototype robot. When the Glatorian and Toa discover the Igniter unscratched, the location where Motunui was. Motunui speaks to them within the Mask of Life and tells them that their future is their own and theirs to build. And he then remains dormant in the Ignite. The Agori, Matoran, Toa, Kratoin, and all the others begin their new life on Spheris Magna. The end. As for background on the Bionicle storyline, 2001 to 2003 was the original time of the island of Motunui, and most people consider that as the so-called golden age of Bionicle, for that was where people say the storyline was the best, the sets were the best, and they had the most fans. However, once they got into 2004, the Metro Nui line, many fans started quitting Bionicle. There was also the fact that by 2008, many people are starting to quit Bionicle, as Bionicle has been around for quite a while, and henceforth, fans were growing up and were forced to leave Bionicle for their everyday lives. As for continuation of the Bionicle storyline, it does in fact still continue on BionicleStory.com. However, that's another story. Sets are no longer in reproduction. However, Bionicle does have a successor. Just as Bionicle is the successor of Sizers and Throwbots, Hero Factory is the successor of Bionicle. Hero Factory uses many of the same technique pieces that Bionicle does. However, many fans complain that this is nowhere near as good as Bionicle, which is true. You see, Bionicle has many more sponsors and has good storyline. However, Hero Factory storyline is hard to find out, as the only way you can find it out is by watching the show on Nicktoons Network, which is rarely on. Very rarely on. However, Bionicle, there are many websites in which you can check the storyline out. Plus, there are many more sponsors that produce not only sets, but many other things as well. Like I said, there are backpacks, books, there were movies, including The Mask of Light, which follows the 2003 storyline, Legends of Metro Nui, following the 2004 storyline, Web of Shadows, following the 2005 storyline, all by the same sponsor, and then in 2009, The Legend Reborn, which is made by a different sponsor, Universal Studios. Like I said, there were many novels that followed the Bionicle storyline. Just about 4 of them, which were in 2001, some of the first Bionicle novels to ever come out, shockingly, they came out that fast. Bionicle grew so popular in such a short notice. Novels were released the very first year sets appeared on the shelves. The first 4 books, I have some of them, were written by Kathy Hapaka, the writer of the Bionicle storyline at the time. However, she later quit, and thus a man named Gregory T. Farshty took control of the Bionicle storyline. Greg has written just about every single other book since. Hapaka and Farshty have written just about every other book. Very rarely will there ever be a book that is not written by either one of them. Speaking of which, I did promise you an interview by the one and only Greg Farshty, so here it is, an exclusive interview with Greg Farshty.
Gathered friends, listen again to
the BS01 podcast.
Hi, this is Greg Farshty. Welcome to the BS1 podcast. I am here to give you guys some inside information if I can today, so I hope that you enjoy the show.
Thank you, Greg. This is Krolix from biosector01.com here with the BS1 podcast. Today we'll be interviewing Greg Farshty, author of the Bionicle books, comics, and editor of the LEGO magazine. Greg is a member of BS01 and BZPower.com and answers questions from us fans nearly every day. However, in the following interview, the BS1 staff are going to be digging a bit deeper beyond the surface, and we will see just how much we really knew about Greg before. Thank you so much for joining us, Greg.
Oh, You're welcome.
I have Kairu here with me to start things off with the first question.
All right. First question we have is, where did you grow up?
Oh, well, I actually was born in New York State. I was born in a little town called Shrub Oak, and when I was 2 years old, we moved to Stamford, Connecticut. So most of my childhood was spent in Stamford, and then when I was 10, we moved to a town called Monroe in New York, which is in Orange County in New York, and I was there all the way through high school and the first 2 years of college. And then when I went into junior year of college, my parents moved to a much smaller town called Narrowsburg, New York, which basically consists of a couple of streets, and the highlight of the year there was standing on the bridge over the Delaware River watching the ice break in the spring.
Oh, wow.
So that gives you an idea of how exciting and entertaining a town this was.
Right. Okay, so you got to see quite a lot of places. How about, what is the first thing you remember being proud of writing?
Well, I think the thing I was probably the most proud of was my very first novel, River of God, because it was just so unexpected to get the opportunity to do it in the first place, and I had, something like 6 or 8 weeks to write 100,000 words, and it was a marathon. I ended up finishing the book in like a 10-hour marathon.
Wow.
on a Sunday because I knew that I was killing virtually all the characters, and I was going to miss them. So I kind of felt like, well, it's like, have a splinter, you got to pull it out real fast, So I just said, well, let's just sit down and let's just do this and let's just get it done. And that was probably the fastest I ever wrote anything. And I've had people tell me it was the most depressing thing that they ever read, which I take as a compliment. So.
Oh, cool. So, yeah, it would make sense to be proud of your first published novel, because starting off a new career is the hardest point, right?
Yeah. Prior to that, I had basically been doing newspaper reporting and sports writing, and it was great. It gave me a lot of experience. I recommend it whenever I have somebody ask me about, how do I become a writer? I always recommend journalism. But the hard part is that you're writing stuff and it's relevant for that day, but the next day it's in the garbage, you know? And it isn't going to really have an impact beyond the day it comes out. And when I went to West End Games, I got to start doing some game writing, and that was fun, and it was creative. But the novel is just a whole other level of creativity, and so it was a challenge because I remember, when I was asked to do it, I didn't know if I could do it or not. I'd never written anything that long before, and it was a challenge, but it was a lot of fun. It was definitely, it's still a book I like to go back and read.
That's neat.
Yeah. Speaking of things you read, what kinds of things have you read?
Well, most of what I read is nonfiction, actually, because I write fiction all week long. When I was young, I read a lot of Sherlock Holmes as a child. I read a lot of comics. When I was in probably junior high school, I was reading a lot of horror for a while there, and science fiction. And then, really, I would say the last several years, I've been reading a lot of history, a lot of mythology, a lot of folklore books, because all that stuff you can just sort of file away in the back of your head. You never know when you might be able to use something of it for a story. I mean, when I wrote Hell's Feast, one of the characters in Hell's Feast was based on a mill pond spirit in Russian mythology. And actually, one of the characters I'm bringing into Bionicle very soon is also based on a Hungarian piece of folklore.
Okay.
So, I use everything.
Well, I have to ask, where will that character show up? Can you say which serial?
It's going to be in Salmon's Tale.
Okay, good. So obviously you ended up writing. What other career paths did you consider growing up?
Well, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a lawyer, actually, and decided not to when I realized I didn't want to defend guilty people.
Uh-huh.
And then when I came out, I got a degree in communications in college, but really didn't have any idea where I was going to work, because where I was going to be living, where my parents were, there was nothing. There was no place to work. There was no place to work within hours of where I was living. And I really didn't know what I was going to do. And I was initially sending out resumes for radio sales jobs because I had been working for the college radio station selling advertisements. And so I sort of started looking into that. Then I happened to see an ad for a local newspaper in the phone book, and I sent them a resume, and they never looked at it. They never looked at my writing samples. They just hired me because I think the guy that had the job before me was in jail or something. And they were like, well, do you have a typewriter and you can bring it in? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, okay, well, you can have the job then.
Nice.
And, yeah, you had to bring your own typewriter in. It was really a top-flight organization. I ended up working there for about a year and a half, I guess. And then I quit in an ethical dispute because I had some and they didn't. And ended up getting a job as a sports editor at another little paper, which actually was half the money, but they were a nicer bunch of people. And that's where I learned how to do photography and develop film and do layout. I mean, you did everything there, you know. So
Sure.
It was a 7-day-a-week job, but it was fun because you could schedule it well in advance. It's like you knew, okay, this Saturday I'm going to be at a football game. Okay, this Saturday I'm going to a soccer game. So you could actually plan your life a little bit, you know. So I enjoyed that, but I wasn't making any money. I was making like $7,000 a year. Doing that, and my father finally came to me and said, you really need to get something where you're making like 5 figures.
Right, sure.
Okay, well, you definitely had a whole bunch of variation on the types of things that you at least got your feet into. What were some of your big influences growing up in those?
Oh, well, I would say in terms of my writing, certainly the comics that I read had some influence. I learned an awful lot about writing from reading comics, mainly in terms of dialogue and plotting and stuff like that. I read a lot of Ambrose Bierce, which I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was a late 19th century satirist, and I learned a lot from reading him because I used to write a lot of humor when I was in high school. He influenced me, and I'm trying to think. I can't think of too many other writers that really influenced me, but I have some guys that I've read that their books are things that I treasure and still go back to. George MacDonald Fraser's Pirates book is one that I read when I was young that I still love to read, and most recently Jasper Ford's book The Fourth Bear, which is a marvelous retelling of the story of the Three Bears, is one that I've really enjoyed. And you know, that's the thing. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time now, but you still get influence. You'll still read stuff and either go, wow, that was really good, or you'll go, wow, I wish I could write like that, you know.
Right.
And I think the best way, really one of the best ways to learn to write is to read people who are better than you are. Because you may never be as good as them, but at least you will aspire to it. If you're just reading stuff that's, you know, the same kind of thing or not as good, and you're kind of reading it because you're like, oh, well, I'm better than that, you're never going to get any better. You have to read people that are really good. So if I sit down to read like a mystery, I'll go read Jeffrey Deaver because Jeffrey Deaver can write rings around me. I mean, I love his writing. It doesn't feel written. It feels like he's just sitting and talking to you. And I wish I could write like that, and I wish I could plot like that, but I don't write the same way he does, and he doesn't write the same way I do. But I'll read that, and I'll be like, I want to go write now because I want to someday be as good as that.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about how you got started out at LEGO.
Okay. Well, essentially, I was looking for a job in Connecticut. I was living in Pennsylvania at the time. I had interviewed for a couple of things. I interviewed to write corporate newsletters at Travelers, and I'd applied for a whole mess of stuff. And I happened to be on a job website and saw an ad for a Lego Club writer. And at the time, I had no idea what the Lego Club even was. And so I sent in, and they had not at that point asked for writing samples. So I sent the resume in and, you know, didn't hear anything. And then I happened to find the ad again, and this time they were asking for writing samples. So I called them up, and I said, well, do you want a writing sample? And they're like, oh, yeah. So I sent something in, and because I'd done some writing for Highlights for Children and stuff when I lived in Pennsylvania. I called them up like 3 weeks later. They hadn't gotten in touch, and I said, I'm just following up. And they're like, oh, yeah, you're the one you sent the writing sample, and you're one of the few who did what we wanted. So I went over to Connecticut, and I interviewed pretty much all day and went back, and another 3 weeks went by. And I called up, and I said, well, you know, what's the deal here? And they're like, oh, yes, we need you to go to New York and interview in our New York office with the web team. So I went down there, and I spent the day down there. And then came home, and they called me up and offered me the job. And I relocated, I think, a few weeks, maybe 3 weeks later, I moved into Connecticut and started the job, and I will have been there 10 years in October.
Wow, very cool.
Now that you're working at LEGO, can you describe for us what a day at work would be like?
A typical day, get in probably between 8:30 and 9 after I drop my wife off at work. On a normal day, I usually have a few meetings. Most of my meetings are with brand managers to discuss content for the magazine. Sometimes it'll be something more fun than that, like seeing some of next year's sets and brainstorming names for them, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you do some writing, usually for the magazine. Also, we have a thing called WebProof, which is a website where we post the pages for the magazine. And we can look at them there, make corrections, and send them on back to the art department. So when it's busy, which it has been for the last few weeks, you'll get web proofs coming in, every 10 minutes. So whatever you're working on, you basically have to stop and go do that. And it can make it hard to get stuff finished sometimes. I work from home 1 day a week because if I have major stuff that needs to be written that I really need to be able to concentrate on, it's a lot easier to do it here. Yeah, pretty much, it's meetings and proofing and whatever writing I can manage to fit in. And then occasionally we'll get a special project, like we recently did a big project for Hero Factory. We did a project for Universe. We did, my staff writer does a lot of work on animation. He does a lot of the writing for the stop-motion animations that we do. And so about half his time is taken up doing that, probably. So that's pretty much, the normal day is pretty much be in the office all day.
Okay, so now we have some Bionicle-related questions. Do you have a favorite memory writing specifically for Bionicle?
I would probably say Time Trap. People always ask me what was my favorite book, and that was my favorite book, and it was because I knew what I wanted to do with it. I didn't have to try to match, a story Bible because it was sort of an intercession book. I knew what I wanted to do. I was going to only have to deal with a few characters, and I wasn't at all sure that I could do it. I wasn't at all sure I could pull the book off. And when it was finally finished, I was just so happy with the way that it turned out, and I still think it's probably one of the best ones of all of them. There was some stuff, early on that I liked Voyage of Fear. That was one other one that I liked. It was generally the ones that were sort of the bridge books, where it wasn't like the one where we flash back to the Paracas history,
Right.
Anything that wasn't really part of the main story for that year, where I was just getting to play and have fun, were probably the things I enjoyed the most.
Definitely understandable. What would you say was the hardest part?
The hardest part of writing for Bionicle was probably the fact that you had so many characters that you had to work in. You had, 25, 30 characters a year, and you're trying to give them all some kind of screen time, and there's just no way to do it. Even with the books, there was just no way to give everybody equal screen time. So some people just fade in the background, and you're kind of left with going, well, why do we even have these characters if we're not going to do anything with them? And occasionally you'd have, like back when we were in, I guess it was 2002, with the Exotella, I was told, well, don't really do anything with them. We don't, the guy who was running the story team at the time just really didn't like them that much and didn't want me to do anything. And it's like, well, so they sort of got 5 minutes of screen time, and then I had to get rid of them. And, you had to, a lot of times, some of it was fun because it was a challenge. If they'd come and go, well, you need to have, focus on this character this month, and you kind of have to change the story to do that. But I think just having to introduce so many characters every year and, make them all interesting and cram so many of them into the storyline was hard. And I think that's why, you do get people complaining about the lack of characterization. And it's basically because you've got 25 characters and a limited amount of space.
Right.
And it's just not possible with, 20,000 words a book to give them all equal time. And you end up just focusing on a handful of them.
Yeah. What would you say was the most rewarding moment in your entire involvement with Bionicle?
I think my most rewarding moment was in, I think it was 2003 or 2004. It was the first Comic-Con that I went to. I had come back from lunch, and there was a family there that were from California, and they had come to the con to meet me. And the little boy was autistic. He had Asperger's syndrome. And he was pretty much just, watching the video games and stuff like that. He was kind of just focused on that. His mother was telling me that he just totally was into Bionicle. He knew every word of everything I'd ever written. This was just his thing, and she was so happy because he had been able to make friends at school because he was into something the other kids were into. You know, she was just, they really had wanted to meet me, and they were so glad that they hadn't missed me and all this other stuff. And I spent a lot of time talking to her. Then I had to go back to work, and as they were leaving, the little boy came running over and gave me this big hug. And autistic kids don't generally do that,
right,
you know, with somebody that they don't even know. And we ended up staying in touch. I am actually still friends with his mom. And we used to exchange Christmas cards and gifts and everything every year, and pictures. And I'm still, you know, kind of keep up with him through his mom. And that was really a wonderful moment. I mean, I can still remember taking the plane home that night and just feeling so thrilled that, you know, something I had done had touched this kid and had made life better for this kid.
Wow.
And that was one of the best things about Bionicle, really, above everything else, is that I got to meet so many fans.
Yeah.
I got to meet so many people that were into it, because a lot of the people, you know, everybody at Lego is really nice, and they're really passionate about Lego and passionate about wanting to put out a good product. But a lot of them don't get the chance to ever meet consumers. They don't get to meet the kids that buy the sets. They don't get to meet the people that are into it. I had this good fortune to get to meet hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Bionicle fans over the last 10 years, and it was incredibly rewarding, and something that I really wouldn't have traded for anything, and I think something that really was a benefit that I had that a lot of the people I work with did not get to have.
Yeah, wow, that's really cool. I'm glad we got to talk about that story.
Yeah, that is great. You know, you got to see the entire legacy of what you created in Bionicle, but everything has a beginning and an end. So could you explain for us, like, describe the beginning and the end of Bionicle?
Well, I don't know that much about the beginning because I wasn't working there at the time. I came on board in the very end of 2000, and at that point they were getting ready for the launch of the line. So one of the first things that they had me do was read the story Bible, and the main thing I remember from that was getting to the end and going, "You're going to end it after a year? You're waking up Montanui after a year?" I said, this thing has so much potential. This could be such a big thing. You know, it's so incredibly interesting. Why would you want to end it after a year? You know, getting the chance to do the comic was a big deal for me because I didn't expect to get to do it. And, you know, of course, 2001, 2002 was such a big thing. I mean, it sold so much better than we expected it to, and it was so incredibly hot for us at the time, and it was just nice to be involved with something that was so popular, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I have to say there were more than a few times over the course of the 10 years that we thought it was going to end. I mean, prior to the Rock Sheet coming out in 2003, all we were hearing from the retailers is, well, this is dead, and we're not interested in this anymore, and, you know, whatever. And it was really the Rock Sheet coming out that saved Bionicle at that time. And it had a lot of ups and downs. I mean, it had years when the marketing budget was cut, and so then the sales would go down. And, you know, there were a lot of different times that we weren't sure what was going to happen with it. There were a lot of times that, you know, the story team was really arguing about stuff, and it just wasn't pleasant to be a part of. And there were other times, especially the last few years, when I would be in a room with Christian from our ad agency and Christopher, who was our set designer, and we would just be riffing off each other, coming up with story stuff, just building on each other's ideas, and it was just enormous fun. They were great people to work with. And the ending was very abrupt. We had actually gone over for a meeting to discuss the 2010 movie, essentially to review the screen treatment that I'd written before we passed it on to the studio.
Right.
And, you know, I had flown to Denmark for the meeting, and we were talking about it, and we were, like, bashing ideas around before the meeting started. And then the meeting started, and the franchise manager said, well, you know, the decision's been made that we're going to end this after 2009, and we're not going to do the second movie, and we have to come up with, you know, another line to take its place. And it was quite a shock for me, and it took a long time for me to get over it. I mean, it was something I'd been so intimately involved with and really had lived and breathed so much that it was very hard to say goodbye to it.
Yeah, I'm sure. I
didn't really completely understand the reasoning at the time, and it was just very, very upsetting for me, and I'm glad that I'm still getting to do the serials, even though it's sometimes hard to work them in my schedule, but I'm glad I'm still getting to do them. And the fact is that even if they hadn't done them, I probably would have found some way to do something on BZ Power if the company would have let me to keep doing some kind of story, because I wasn't ready to let it go yet.
Right. Okay.
We're definitely thankful for that.
Very true. Okay, we have just one more question here for you today, Greg, and that is, what's in your future?
Well, one of the things that's in my future is a baby.
Yay!
Yes, my wife and I are expecting our first child in September.
That's so cool.
Which is part of the reason that I've told a few people, well, I may not be able to help you out with this project because I may be way too busy. I'm still, involved with the magazine, the website, Club TV, all the other things that Club is doing. And I've done a little bit of writing for Hero Factory, not too much yet. I've been doing a little bit of stuff for the Polish publisher Amit that's done some of the Bionicle books, and I've gotten to do a little bit of original fiction for them, which was okay. The stuff I've been doing for Lego has largely been just adaptations of the Story Bible or adaptations of stuff other people have written, so I haven't really gotten to be too creative with any of that yet. I had done a little diary entry for one of the villains for the Polish company, and got a very nice email like, oh, this is really good, oh, we really feel like we know him now, and I'm like, I'm going to get some characterization into this if it kills me. So, I'm doing some work on that, and then we have another line coming out in 2011 that I'm hoping to have some involvement with. I think the overall story is probably already pretty much written, but I'm hoping to, be involved with it on a club level, at least, and we'll see how that goes. I mean, that's something that the company's very excited about, so hopefully it'll have some legs.
All right, well, definitely congratulations on the baby news. That's very exciting.
Yeah, thank you.
So before we let you go here, Greg, I just wanted to give you the chance to say anything that you wanted to the Bionicle fans listening.
Well, I think the main thing I'd like to say is just to say thank you for 10 years of being so passionately involved in this. I mean, it was really the fans that made Bionicle a bigger thing than just a toy line. When it ended, the analogy I used with a lot of kids was Star Trek. And I basically said, when Star Trek ended, the network didn't care about it anymore. Nobody cared about it anymore. And it was the fans that kept it alive until finally somebody turned around and said, well, you know what? There's a whole mess of people out there that like this. Let's do something with it again. And it was... it was a lot of years. A lot of years went by before that happened. But if the fans shrug their shoulders and are like, I don't care about this anymore and I'll just forget about it, then everybody else is just going to forget about it too. So the only people, Lego Company really can't do it. The only people that can keep the flame alive is the fans. And if the fans keep it alive, who knows? Maybe it'll come back someday. Maybe somebody at Lego will look at that and go, well, you know what? There's still people that love this, that still care about this, and there's still a market for it, and maybe we can do something with it again someday. And that it's a lot of responsibility and it's a load, but it's something only fans can do.
Right.
And that's why I'm still on the site answering questions. That's why I was willing to keep doing the serials and all that sort of thing, because that's my contribution to that. I figure I can't ask you guys to do it if I'm not willing to do it. But that's really going to be up to all the people, not only the people on your site and BZ Power and the other Bionicle fan sites, but the kids who aren't on fan sites, the kids who are out there writing stories and drawing pictures and coming up with their own TOA and all that sort of thing. They're the ones that are going to keep this thing alive and maybe someday be able to buy it for their own kids.
Well said. Okay, well, thank you very much again for joining us on the show. Take care, Greg.
As you can see, Bionicle has promoted many emotional hearts and has become very popular over the years. But LEGO said it is time to move on. Many people are still compassionate about Bionicle, and they beg and plead LEGO to bring it back and make more sets. But alas, LEGO is too stubborn to listen. They never listen. We tell them so many times to fix things, but they never do. But Anyway, the time has come to move on. My friends, it is time to go.